In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
There we go. We are on track, ready to get going. It is 7 o'clock here. It is 5 for you. It is already dark. It feels like dinner time.
I know. It's the whole thing.
Who's this for? Is this for the farmers?
Yeah, I could think so. It was like something with the farmers so they would have more daylight or something, and then now they have less daylight, but like I don't really know. And I know that we voted for it in California to not do it anymore because like Arizona and Hawaii don't do it. And then that is stuck in whatever somewhere in DC because there's some Republican who has one to make it national that you have to do it. So like the fact that we voted that we don't want to do it doesn't matter because that guy's like in the middle of like ruining everyone's day.
Oh my God, so annoying. I really hate this. But whatever, we're stuck with it. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and kick things off. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, a podcast where we cover two stories, one historic, one true crime, about events that are doomed to fail. Joined here by Farz and Taylor. How are you, Taylor?
I'm good. How are you?
Being very official and formal. I'm good. I've been in very doomed to fail headspace because I've literally just wrapped up my research, and so I'm like already.
You look a little scary right now. It's dark. You could be wearing a cloak. I don't know. I'm not sure what you're wearing. You're wearing a
little hoodie,
very low cut tank top and a hoodie. So I don't know. It's gonna be a cloak. Looks like you have demon horns because you have that bull behind you.
It does look scary. And I
So all sorts
closed.
of things.
And the missus is watching TV in the other room, and so I'm closed the door, so now there's no light at all in here. So, yeah. Very dark.
Do you have a lamp? Do you have a lamp?
No, I have this thing here. Let me turn this on. Maybe this will make it better. Here, does this look better?
I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, that's weird. What is that? Like a fake fish tank?
No, it has like it's a humidifier thing.
Oh, I have one too. Mine right here. Mine looks like an egg. Here's mine.
Fun. Yeah, it's one of those.
Got it with my FSA money. I'm gonna hold it under my face.
Wait, your FSA paid for that?
This is cool. Yeah, dude, they pay for humidifiers.
I did not know that.
It's for your health.
I'm a sucker. I paid for this out of pocket.
Shouldn't have. Yeah, I'm good. I went to a birthday party today for one of Florence's friends. There was a horse. You liked it.
Did you ride the horse?
I just took a photo. Oh God, no. Gross. It's 2023. There's literally no reason to ride horses. No.
Fair.
Absolutely not.
My most traumatic.
I was thinking.
My most traumatic childhood
you go. Tell me. Yeah.
Was when we had to do it. We did like a camp field trip for like a weekend, my elementary school, and at that time I was like super fat. I was like a pudgy little thing, and there was a part where we had to go like ride horses, and that was part of the camp retreat. And I was so embarrassed that I couldn't get up that I was like, I'm scared of horses, so I was like, I'm not gonna ride. And so me and like this one dad just stayed behind, so I wouldn't have to get on the horse.
That's really sad.
And now here I am.
You are living in Texas. Yeah, no, I like to think that there's like some ancestor of mine from like 500 years ago, some like farm girl in Europe who was like, this fucking sucks. Fuck this shit. And I'm living her animal-free dream. And I'm happy to be carrying that for her.
Good. You're doing your ancestors proud.
Yeah. Living inside.
Yeah, living inside with
all sorts of stuff.
Conditioned air of all things.
It's wonderful. I have this humidifier. Shit.
You got a humidifier. You're all set. I think. Am I the first to go today?
You are.
What are you going to be consuming?
Coffee.
Actually, or?
No, I'm drinking tea, but coffee's I try to stick to a theme. So my theme is coffee. In real life, I'm drinking tea.
Got it. I'm drinking water because I'm actually drinking water and because it's topical to the topic that I'm discussing, which is topical to water.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and kick things off. This might be a bit of a long one, actually. I think do it in a tight 30. Okay. So we are back to engineering disasters today. And
I'm
actually,
excited.
I know I thought about like splitting it up the way you did yours, the volcanoes. So I was like, people just get bored of listening to like engineering stuff. And then I was like, I started going down a rabbit hole about this one specific disaster. I was like, this is too good. I got to keep going. And so here we
I
are.
mean, whatever. You skipped a week and it's fine. There's
There you
no
go.
there's no rules. Do whatever
There's
you
no
want.
rules. It's just right.
Yeah.
Outback
Mhm.
Steakhouse. So this one is like the kind of an engineering disaster that like really sparked my interest in engineering disasters because it is so horrific and so traumatic, and the magnitude of it and the scale of it was so huge, and the amount of issues and reasons why it happened was so obvious and transparent. It was like a weird convergence of like horrible, horrible outcome, one of the worst in human history, mixed with so many different ways where it could have been preventable that wasn't realized. And so I'm going to go into this topic, but I will say that I'm going to be referencing some images for this, and they are going to be
Okay.
disturbing. So, like, Google them if you want to, but you don't have to.
Okay.
And
I won't put them on the social, but they'll be optional.
yeah, yeah, and also there's a ton of like YouTube content out there about this disaster, as well as a 2014 Martin Sheen and Cal Penn and Misha Barton movie that's made about it. So it could be fun to go watch. I heard it's mixed reviews, but it should be interesting.
None of
So,
those people make sense in the same sentence, so that is exciting.
well, the
Um,
events happened in India, and Cal Penn was like a fake journalist during that time.
oh, I mean, it's hilarious. Um, I feel like I should plan to have nightmares about this. I've been having nightmares that I missed our friends' champagne toast the night before their wedding. Like that's my nightmares at the moment. So I'm real excited to have an actual nightmare.
Yeah, let's add on to it
Go
then.
ahead.
So
Let's do it.
the topic I'm going to be discussing. Okay, so my whole point was go look at the YouTube videos because I think if you were to see the imagery of what I'm talking about, it would really paint a picture for you of like what was going on and what it must
Okay.
have been like to be in this situation. So the topic I'm going to be
Okay.
discussing is called the Bhopal Disaster. Bhopal is
Okay.
spelled B as in boy, H-O-P as in Hardy, A-L. Bhopal. So it is widely
I'm so sorry
considered.
that I laughed because P for party in this disaster. Cool.
Well, because at first I was going to say P for P, and I was like, you can't define it with whatever. You understand. Um,
Indeed.
so this is widely considered to be the worst industrial accident in the world, and it came at a really strange time. It came during this like weird 1980s greed is good, corporations fucking over the little people. Chernobyl was just 2 years, a little over 2 years after this, and so there was like a lot of things that
Hmm.
were like falling apart. Like the domino was falling of like these shitty companies doing shitty things and getting away with it.
Uh-huh.
And this was the worst of that. The like worse than Chernobyl. It was a big deal.
Oh
So
no.
the disaster we're going to be discussing took place between December 2nd and December 3rd, so of 1984. So it basically started at like 11:45 p.m. on the 2nd and like ended at like 1 a.m. on the 3rd. So it's just like it falls within that kind of time bracket. And it happened in a
Hmm.
part of India known as Madhya Pradesh, which is a basically it's like a shanty town. Like it's really not even like a city. Like
Hmm.
picture like hovels, like Hooverville
Yeah.
era kind of homes, and that's basically what it was.
Hmm.
One thing I
Totally.
thought about when I was researching this episode was how there's like a form of privilege I never thought of before, which was I was never raised next to a pesticide plant, a chemical factory, a nuclear power plant, like none of that stuff.
Hmm.
And
No, totally. I was just talking about that with my husband. Like, we're so lucky that we have walls. I know, like I said that to my 500-year-old ancestor, but there's plenty of people that don't have walls. They live in those like corrugated steel
yeah,
shanty towns all over the world.
yeah,
Millions of people,
that's
it's crazy.
basically what this was. I actually looked into this, Taylor. It's actually a term that was coined in like the late 1980s called environmental racism, which is basically the
Hmm.
convergence of like four factors. I didn't write the factors here, but it was something to the effect of um, companies trying to maximize profits, meaning they needed to acquire land at a very low cost. The people who were in
Hmm.
that area having no political power and not having the ability to be mobile due to poverty. So like all these factors kind of converge
Hmm.
this environmental racism, which is like let's put this horrible, horrible thing next to these poor people in India who literally live in like cardboard boxes because they don't have a choice.
Right.
And that's basically
Right.
what
And they
ended up
can't
happening.
leave. Which,
Yeah,
which we've talked about with like disasters before, like or like living in unsafe places. Like if people could move out of Michigan, they would, but they can't sell their houses. Like there's nowhere to go.
right,
So like in
right.
a lot of cases, yeah.
So
Okay.
the main antagonist of the story is a company called Union Carbide, which sounds like an amazingly evil corporation. It sounds like one of those RoboCop movie corporations.
Oh my God, totally. I love
And
RoboCop.
Union Carbide, they were a chemical manufacturer, and they were most of it did this for industrial use. And in 1969, it built this factory in Bhopal to produce a type of pesticide called Sevin, Sevin, which that name
Hmm.
sounded familiar to me. I think it's like I think that's the brand name, but it's also used in like a bunch of other stuff. I think it's like roach spray and whatever. It's all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Part of the production process of creating Seven includes the use and creation of a chemical known as methyl isocyanate, which sounds really bad because it is. It goes also by the term MIC, but MIC is like an internal nomenclature. The science world knows it as methyl isocyanate, and that's going to come in useful and handy to know that later on.
Okay.
MIC is a colorless, flammable liquid that is very, very bad for human health. If you come
Hmm.
in contact with it, and either it's liquid or if it's heated, it's in boiled, it's vaporized form, the side effects are a lung edema, which is basically drowning in water in your lungs while you're above ground,
Oh my,
burning of your eyes, your nose, your throat, hemorrhaging of your lungs, which means you drown with your lungs full of blood instead of water this time.
oh my
Overall, it
God.
has a very, very high death rate if it comes in contact with someone, and there's no antidote for it. There's no way to
And is
mitigate
that
death
is that as a gas?
as a gas. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And on December 1st, 1984, employees of this factory started feeling kind of the milder effects of MIC poisoning. They'd complain of chest pain, coughing, irritated nose, eyes, and throats. And so they started investigating it. So by late December 2nd, it was concluded that somehow water had found its way into a tank called E610, which E610 had two sister tanks that were all next to it. This is the one that became contaminated with water. And at that time, it contained 42 tons of MIC. That alone was problematic because that's actually not how you're supposed to store it. The entire
Hmm.
capacity of the tank is 60 tons, but you're only supposed to store it half full because the other half has to be inert gas to prevent water from getting in and oxidizing and corroding the chemical compounds and releasing as gas.
I feel like I kind of get that because they don't like fully fill up our propane tank.
Right.
It's like the gas is in there and then there's like air or whatever.
Yeah, there's a really good
Yes.
reason for that. The reason for that is exactly what we're going to discuss. There's like 70 reasons why this happened, and that is one of the obvious reasons why it ended up happening. But it also
There's
shows that
always
even
70
the
reasons why these happen. Yeah.
yeah, but it also shows at the baseline of like how obviously preventable so much of this shit was. Just don't do the
Hmm.
thing that you're told not to do, and you should be fine. But you compound that with the other 100 things you weren't supposed to do that you ended up doing, and now you're fucked. So,
Right. Totally.
so again, 42 tons worth of this liquid compound is in this tank called E610. Water being introduced to MIC has the ability to create a chain reaction. It immediately reacts to it, and it starts vaporizing the liquid MIC and turning it into a gas, which generates heat, which increases pressure. Make sense?
Hmm. Yes.
So this night, they noticed that the pressure inside of E610 had increased from 2 psi to 10 psi in the span of 30 minutes. These guys were like, "This is a mistake. It's a faulty reading. Like, the pressure gauge is faulty. That's the only reason." But also, they already knew people were getting sick. Like, people were already falling off from mild versions of
Yeah.
this poisoning. So they should have known something was going on.
It sounds like, well, it sounds like they should have had some sort of canary, right? To get sick first.
That's true. We should always have one canary cage above every MIC tank.
Yeah. Um, oh, wait, it had something else from what you just said. Well, it sounds like they should have like been aware that like things were happening. It'll come back to me. Keep going.
Well, so by 11:45 p.m. on December 2nd, it was clear enough that something was going on that they reported to their supervisors they had an issue with this tank. And the
Oh, I
supervisors,
remember my thing.
oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Do you remember? And did you watch the Chernobyl show? I feel like that is what you might have watched.
I've seen like two of the episodes.
There's like a whole part in it where they're like, whatever, like they're measuring like radiation, and they're like, if it goes past like 15, then like it's really really bad. But so all of the measurements like went to 15, and they were like, well, then it's not that bad because it didn't go past 15. That's a made up number, but you know what I mean. But
Yeah,
none of the machines could even read further than that. So when they finally got another machine, it was like 3,000. But like they wouldn't have known with the machines they had because they didn't go up to that number. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. Again, it's like one of like a thousand things going wrong that results in
Yeah,
this kind of stuff happening. I'm gonna close that story. Just freak
totally.
me out that it's open. Makes me feel like someone's gonna start running at me. So at 11:45 p.m. on December 2nd, again, they had realized there's probably something really wrong. They went to their supervisors and said, "Hey, we have this issue," but at that time, they were 30 minutes away from a tea break. So at 12:15 a.m. on December 3rd was the scheduled tea break, and they said,
Like
"Let's wait and
like drinking tea.
literally like drinking tea."
Okay.
And they were like, "Let's put this on hold. Let's put a pin in this. We'll come back to it after tea time." But like again, this is a chemical chain reaction. It's happening at the speed of sound. Like there is no
Right, you can't take a
time.
break.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
not like let's go check out the Black Friday sales, then come back and deal with this. Like it doesn't work that way. The tea break ends 30 minutes later, so it's 12:45 a.m. on December 3rd. And at this point, the pressure in the tank had gone from the 10 psi, which is the latest reading, to 40 psi, which is really bad. It's like about to burst because the amount of vapor that's being generated is too much. So
Uh-huh.
at this point, gas had started being vented into the atmosphere already because the
Uh-huh.
seams couldn't handle that volume of pressure, and so it started leaking out of the tank. Overall, 30 tons of gas had seeped out and been vented into the atmosphere before any alarm bells were sounded. So
Wow.
usually what ends up happening when at a facility like this where it having an issue could have impacts further than the factory itself is that the alarm bells are connected to each other. So if you were to sound an all hands alarm inside this factory, everybody inside the factory would know something was up, so you could try to mitigate the issue or run away. And it would sound an alarm
Hmm.
outside the factory, so everybody that's around the town would also know that something was going on and be able to run away. But
Right.
that was also one of the safety issues was that they disabled the the 1-2 punch of it, and so they sounded an alarm internally, and then one tiny alarm went off for like a split second outside, and then it was disabled, and because the systems have been
Whoa.
disconnected from each other. Meanwhile, everybody at the factory was running upwind away from the factory. The town was downwind. So the factory people
Hmm.
knew what was going on, and nobody was giving the alert of the all hands to anybody outside the factory. So gas is leaking out, and as as it starts kind of settling over the city, people in the city started reacting to it, obviously, and the police reached out to the folks at the factory and said, "Hey, we've got some people getting really sick out here. What's going on over there?" They said, "Nothing to worry about. It's all good. Everything's fine." It was like this whole attempt to try to cover things up started basically immediately as people were starting to flee. And like I mentioned before,
Uh-huh.
these are shanties. They're living in like cardboard boxes or like corrugated steel. Like they're trying to run a,
Right.
like nobody even has a car. They're like trying to run away from this thing. And if
And
you
you're
look
running
up,
away from something that you can't see, right?
so you could see it because it was
Okay.
denser than air, which also meant
Uh-huh.
that if you were young or infirm, like in a wheelchair, you were obviously dead. Like because it was denser than air, so it would settle lower on the ground in the air column,
Oh.
and so you're gonna get
Mm.
a heavier dose of it. And add to that the fact that the local hospital, when they started seeing initial reports of this exposure and these illnesses, they had no idea what was going on. I mean, they don't know exactly what seven the pesticide is made out of. They don't know what MIC is. Again, that's a marketing language. That's not actually what the compound is called. They actually thought they were dealing
Right.
with the spread of an ammonia leak. They're like, that's probably what is going on. That was basically their best guess. And when they called the factory to figure out what was going on, they said it's MIC, and they're like, okay, like I don't know what that is. So sure, we'll just deal with the symptoms, I guess.
Yeah.
I
They
was
should have
looking.
been, well, they should have been super prepared for that, right? Just live next
Yeah,
to it.
yeah. Well, that was the thing that later came up once obviously all this stuff goes to trial is they were like they couldn't be prepared for something that was so impossible to happen. Like it was there were so many safety precautions that had to be bypassed for this to end up happening, and we're going to go through those
Hmm.
one by one. And so that's why they never dealt with it. They
Oh
never
my
thought
God.
to figure out a solution for this. Which really the solution you can see pictures of this later on when I bring up the Atlantis article about it. But the solution would have been to put giant like sheets of fabric up like high vertically, and then douse them with water, and then that's what's like kind of capture the gas in the fabric, so you can actually breathe around there. Which yeah,
That doesn't seem that hard.
it's a solution. Yeah.
I mean, that's stuff like that they have in their
Right.
homes.
Right. Exactly.
If they just didn't
They
know
could have
how to
done
do it.
something. Yeah. Think about it. You could
Yeah.
just wrap that around your face, right? Like you just wrap a thing of water around your face. I mean, I think you may be
Yeah.
waterboarding yourself, but otherwise it should work.
Yeah.
One distinction of Bhopal is that it is also one of the most densely packed cities in the most densely packed country in the world. The
Hmm.
shanty town, these were just workers around the factory. Like they were just like you just wake up. I mean, the town literally was built around this thing. It was like the factory was kind of like the central nucleus of the entire city, which is why it had such a
Uh-huh.
dramatic impact. Because if it leaves the factory, the only place it has to go and settle is this tiny town that's right beneath it.
Hmm.
As people start kind of dropping, so too do the animals. So basically, it turns into a zombie hellscape. So like all their livestock is dead. Every animal around them is falling down. Apparently, it's turning some of the leaves on the trees black. Like it looks like hell on earth, is what the
Ugh.
eyewitness survival statements of this have been about what it looked like. And there's a lot of difference of opinion in terms of the death count. So some sources put the death count somewhere around 2,200 people like that night. Others put it closer to 5,000, so it's somewhere in that range. I've also seen 3,600, so it's somewhere in the two
Uh-huh.
to 5,000 person range, like that initial first night. In addition to that, roughly 41,000 people became severely disabled, like people needing life support for the rest of their lives or organ transplants and stuff like that.
Oh
And
my
then
God.
nearly 600,000, 574,000 people were injured as a result of this. So they had to
Holy
seek
shit.
medical attention. It was the entire town. Like it was literally the entire town.
Hmm.
There's a photo you should find that is haunting and terrifying, and it was taken
Is it
on
the
the
baby?
yeah. Did
I
you see it
hate it.
already?
I saw it. Just the baby's face in the dirt?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
So
did.
that picture was taken by a pretty well-renowned, famous photographer called Raghu Ray, and they were basically putting together mass burning pits to like destroy the bodies because there were so many bodies available. And like the system there was no infrastructure for something like this. And this guy took this picture that ended up becoming basically the image that was the face of the Bhopal disaster. What did you search? You
God,
just
it's so
searched
sad.
Bhopal?
Yeah, Bhopal disaster. And it's like the first thing that comes up is that poor baby.
Yeah, yeah. So, the way that with Auschwitz, it's always like the train tracks that show the way gate. Like that is this is
Yeah,
that picture became the endemic picture, and nobody knows who that baby is. Usually, the entire families were dead. So a lot of the eyewitness
right.
accounts that
Its
I
whole
read,
family's probably dead.
yeah, it was like it'd be like a kid who has like seven siblings and two parents, and he just woke up and the whole family was dead. For some reason, it didn't affect
Uh-huh.
him. So, so
Ugh.
nobody knows who the kid was. Um, the Atlantic also released this awesome photo op-ed of what happened. This was in 2014. It was called Bhopal, the world's worst industrial disaster 30 years later. It is totally worth Googling. You can get pictures of what it looked like back then. You get pictures of what it looks like now. It looks terrifying right now. It looks like this plant is just like this weird abandoned. It looks haunted. The whole place
Hmm.
looks fucking haunted,
Hmm.
which it probably is.
Ugh.
So all this goes down, and people are obviously very upset. Union Carbide mostly tries to absolve itself of any blame. They held to this theory called the worker sabotage theory of what ended up happening. They claimed that
Hmm.
was nearly impossible for water to enter the tank without someone actually forcing the water into the tank. And their argument is that some random worker decided to kill off the town and hook the water line to the side of the tank. That's their argument.
Hmm. Yeah.
So right now, realistically, we actually don't even know what ended up causing this. We know that the plant was very poorly maintained, and we also know that the government of India basically shut off access to the plant and conducted their own investigation. So nobody actually got to investigate what was going on outside of the government itself, and the government was the one that's also suing Union Carbide for billions and billions of dollars over what they ended up causing. So
Hmm.
the government's take on this was that there were workers who were about 400 feet away trying to unclog a pipe somewhere, and they were using forced
Hmm.
induction water to clear that pipe. And they weren't using what's called a slip line plate, which prevents water from leaking outside that pipe. And then water from
Hmm.
that ended up getting inside this tank. There was also like an obvious cultural bias here. So apparently, very few of the plant operators understood English, but all these safety equipment, safety manuals, and the writings on them, the warnings on them, were all written in English, and so nobody actually could read any of this stuff, which is like an obvious
It's
bad thing.
unbelievable.
I know, it's so simple.
Jesus
Again,
Christ.
so many of these things have to add up.
Yeah. Ugh.
So in addition to this, there were also other safety precautions that were there but not operational at the time. So, for example, most of these plants like this have what's called a flare tower, which is basically what it sounds like. It is a high tower with a flame at the end of it. And so, if gas is escaping from one of these tanks, it's supposed to be routed up this flare tower, and then it gets burned off before it can be released into the atmosphere. But in this case,
I
the
think I've
flare
seen
tower,
those in like, I feel like I see those,
yeah, yeah,
right?
it's so
It's like the
anytime
flame.
at
Yeah.
the very end, yeah, it's like usually you would see it with like an oil derrick, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but in this case, that flare tower had been inoperational for about 5 months. Could not work. Did not work. 5 months. Again, a
Jesus
million things
Christ.
adding up.
Yeah.
It was, this is another insane one. So it was later discovered that all these tanks had refrigeration units because again, there's several things that have to come together for this to happen. So one, there has to
Right.
be a certain temperature. It has to have a conductive force introduced to it. In this case, water. Like somebody didn't release the pressure valve on time. Like there was 100 things that had to
Yeah.
happen. So there's 100 things that they do ahead of time to prevent this from happening. One of those was refrigerating the units. So all these units individually have refrigeration units attached to them to keep them at a steady temperature. In this case, it would have been 4.5 degrees Celsius. In this case, the refrigeration unit was broken, so it wasn't working. So it was actually
Right.
at ambient temperature, which was 20 degrees Celsius at the time. And also, this was outlined in the manuals, but the manuals were in English, so nobody knew. So Union Carbide was later on sold to Dow Chemicals. I'm going to get into a lot more detail here, but for the time being, just know that they were sold to Dow Chemicals. They actually still maintain a website that is just about Bhopal. And I went to it, I looked it up. It was really, really interesting. I've never seen like a corporate, here's our take on this event that like we're not even
Uh-huh.
responsible for at this point anymore because it's been like 40 years now and we've been sold off to two different companies. So like they're still maintaining their innocence and what they talk about on their website is they leaned heavily on that worker sabotage theory. So
Uh-huh.
it's interesting because I look at the circumstances, this whole environmental racism thing. I look at where they set this plant up. I look at how they treated their workers. I look at how everything was in a state of deterioration and breakdown, and nobody gave a shit because they're like, "Fuck these people. If they die, they die. It doesn't really matter." All this stuff,
Hmm.
and it's just obvious. Like you were the responsible party and you did this. But when you look at this worker sabotage theory, it kind of makes sense. Like I feel like maybe those things can all be true. You can be awful and shitty and evil, and also you didn't do like this. So
Yes.
one of the things was again, none of these safety things were in effect, but the very root cause of this was water going into the tank. That started the chemical reaction, and then everything fucked up before that, and everything fucked up after that. But how did the water get into a sealed tank that was specifically designed to not let water absorb into it? So
Right.
One report stated that for water from the workers cleaning that clogged pipe 400 feet away to have entered the tank, the water would have had to have reached a height of 10 feet before it could have gone. And it was impossible. It was an open space. It never would have gotten to 10 feet high. And so they were like, it doesn't make
Right.
any sense how water could have gotten into this thing. In addition to that, there was this guy who was the plant operations manager who was responsible for the manufacture of MIC. And in 2017, there was like another court case. There's so many court cases. Like I'm gonna blow
I'm
past the
sure.
court cases later on because I'm like we'll all just nod off to sleep driving and listen to this if I don't. But in 2017, there was a court case, and this guy who was a productions manager for the first time came out and said this was not an accident, that somebody physically did this. He actually named a guy that he think did
Uh-huh.
this, and on one part, I'm like, well, you were the plant operations manager responsible for production of this stuff. So like you have an incentive to say this wasn't done, this didn't happen accidentally, somebody deliberately did this. But also it's 2017. So like what if you're gonna lie, why do it now? Like, I mean, presumably this guy's like 80 years old
Right.
now. Like why so a part of me thinks like maybe it's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because nobody can definitively say how water got into the tank. That's all we know. We do
Right.
know that the
Well,
day
wait, has
after
anyone
this,
ever,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, has anyone been able to look at the tank?
Yeah, yeah, but that's the
Okay,
thing.
not just like
So
the government.
no, just the government has. So that's what
Right.
Union Carbide is
That's my
saying.
suspicious question. Yeah.
Yeah, they're saying that like let us investigate this thing. Like it's our plant. We would know better than you would. And they were
Right.
completely cut out of the investigation by the government. It's worth noting that the government also owned 22% of this company. And so they also have an incentive to say it was all
Of
this third
course.
party because they don't want to pay out the victims.
100%. Yeah. That checks out as BS.
Right. So Union Carbide came out initially with a $350 million settlement offer and to set up a victims fund. They said that if they did it this way, they would essentially earn interest over the term of 20 years to the tune of $600 million. Then they could settle all liability claims for the disaster and care for the victims. The government of India said, no, fuck this. We're not going to accept that offer. We want 3.3 billion, which Union Carbide obviously turned down because that was more or less their market cap at the time.
Right.
So part of India's reason for why they were, I mean, the disparity, the 10x disparity in the dollar figure was how bad this event actually was. So as I mentioned, livestock, flora, fauna, everything was basically contaminated, or if it wasn't contaminated, it was already dead. So in addition to
Right.
that, the people who survived and were still in that area, they couldn't use the land. They couldn't fish because they thought the fish contained
Right.
MIC. They couldn't um, eat the livestock. They thought that had MIC. And so as a result of this, they're also dealing with a massive, massive food shortage. And
Mm-hmm.
because nobody had contemplated a disaster of this scale and size, I mean, think about like 600,000 people show up at your door one day and are like, we all need medical attention, the most severe case
Right.
possible. Nobody was equipped for this. And so as a result, they also had to build these makeshift hospitals. They had to bring in doctors that were basically like low tier doctors, the worst of the worst, because there wasn't enough doctors to go around for the entire city or the entire country. Is the actual
Mm-hmm.
cost to India's government was tremendous because they also had to figure out how to rehome these people, 500,000 of them who could no longer use this part of the country. It was all
Yeah.
terrible. So ultimately, the two parties settled on, I think it's like a pretty modest amount of money. It was $470 million plus 17 million to basically fund a hospital dedicated to just treating these victims. So pretty light, like just shy of half a billion, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at the same time as the civil case is going on, there's also several criminal cases going on. So the CEO of Union Carbide is a guy named, or was a guy, he died in 2014. It was a guy named Warren Anderson, and he's like the quintessential Gordon Gekko. Like when I looked at his pictures, I was like, man, like you just look like you killed a bunch of
It was the 80s.
brown people. Like,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
he was charged with manslaughter by the government of India, and an extradition request was sent to the United States, which the U.S. was like, we're not doing this. We're not going to send this guy to go to jail in India. So ultimately, only 7 people who worked in Union Carbide were charged and faced any actual tangible consequences. And these were just the Indian guys.
Mm-hmm.
These were the executives in
Of
India.
course.
That, yeah, like they were the only ones they get a hold of. I mean, I'm sure if you're living in Bhopal and you're an executive, you're probably not like a Warren Anderson who's like probably got like 7 homes in the Hamptons. So these guys
Yeah.
ended up getting a negligent homicide charge. They faced 2 years sentences, which they were actually paroled almost immediately. And they each received a $2,800 fine for what they did or didn't do.
Wow.
It's interesting because today, women in that area, when they're lactating, MIC is still found in their breast milk. Like
Oh my God.
it is a absolute hellscape even to this day. And
Wow.
since all this ended up happening, obviously the factory's been shut down. That tank hasn't been destroyed. It's still kind of sitting there. Recently, I think it was like 2016, 2017, some investigative reporter basically all these people who still live in this area are like, this thing is still poisoning us. Like there's still chemicals here. They're leaking out of these tanks that have not been operational for 40 years. They're in the groundwater.
Mm-hmm.
And this one investigative reporter went there to kind of investigate the spot. I can't imagine how fucking terrifying this had to be. Like I hope this guy makes $1 million on his reporting because the thought of just going here and walking around it, like, you've seen pictures of it, right? It looks absolutely nightmarish.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, so he was trying to investigate if there actually is still chemicals there that are being leaked into the ground. He ended up getting crazy sick. Like he had to be hospitalized in the ICU just by walking around this place. So it is still doing something. It's still there. It's still leaching poison into the ground for these poor people, and it presumably always will. It's been a bit completely abandoned. The company itself, like I mentioned, was sold off to Dow Chemicals. It is not operating in Bhopal anymore. So that's the latest and
Right. So the
greatest.
people there like don't even have any jobs anymore.
There's nothing. The financial impact of all of this, you lose your family, you lose your home, you lose your animals, you lose your fucking vegetation. Like you can't drink the water. Like it is. I don't even know how they survive.
Yeah.
A
I
lot of
mean,
these
they
folks
like
ended
barely
up.
do.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, they were barely surviving anyways. A lot of these folks ended up moving to other parts of India, but there's still a city there. Like there's still people that live there. It's still a I'm not going to say a thriving metropolis, but it's still a metropolis in some ways. But it's like you're just living there with the fact that 30 tons of your everything around you is contaminated with this shit. It doesn't go away. It also
Mhm.
doesn't go away. Like it's like nuclear radiation, just kind of sticks around.
Totally. Ugh, that's terrible.
But the reason I kept bringing up the documentary is like I was trying to paint a picture of what this city looked like. It's like every. It's not their fault. I mean, look, you can't blame people for being poor, but it just looks like a hellscape. Like it just looks like hell on earth. And then you add into the fact that like all the city is now poisoned and it's just and your animals are all dead. It's just like the whole thing is just such a nightmarish picture. And think about it, it happened like 1 o'clock in the morning. So like you're in bed and all of a sudden you can't breathe, your
Right.
eyes are
You're dead.
burning, and your nose is like turning blood red.
And like people could have just died and not even noticed.
No, I don't think so.
Or
This
you just
sounds
have
like a
you woke
horrible.
up.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah, because this reminds me a lot of chlorine poisoning. Have you heard about chlorine poisoning at all?
Uh-uh.
So when chlorine
What
is
is that?
vaporized and you breathe it, it does to your eyes, it does to everything inside of you what like the small doses you get if you open your eyes under water in a pool do. It just basically incinerates your insides. Like it just flames you from the inside out. It's a horrible way to die. It's one
Mm-hmm.
of the worst ways to die known to man. And that's also what this was essentially. So no, you would know. You would know. You would die relatively quickly, but you're dying of hemorrhaging inside of you, and so bleeding out isn't going to be a fast process.
Yeah. Ugh, it's terrible.
There's a great chlorine story. I read it like forever ago, and it was like this couple somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Nobody was around them, and this train transporting a bunch of chlorine derailed, and it vaporized the chlorine, and then it just like was around this couple's house and they couldn't leave and they had to like sit there and I think they both died but I'll research that and do an update but it's crazy
Oh
crazy
my God,
scary.
it's terrible. Yeah. Well, like, didn't we, some of those things happened recently? Like, wasn't there that train in Ohio that had all that, like,
Yeah,
gas
I think that was
in the
chlorine too.
air?
Yeah,
Oh,
that might have been
it's
chlorine.
bad.
Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah.
It's really bad stuff. So and also there's like this element of like industrialness to it of like it's just I don't know. There's an environmental racism piece of it, the greed is good piece of it, the fact that it's just all bad. It's like the worst
Yeah,
parts of human nature kind of colliding in creating this situation. And also, the name is terrifying. Union Carbide is coming to town to build a factory. It's like, get the fuck out of here with that. I don't want Union
absolutely
Carbide
not. You
here.
freaking movie villains. Get out of town.
With
Get out of
Warren
here.
Anderson with his amazing
Oh, wait, let
hair.
me Google him.
He does have amazing hair. He looks like a CEO. Like this guy was born to be the CEO of a company that kills a bunch of brown people.
Oh, I see him. Yeah. hmm 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 A
Fun
little bit
fact:
older than a Gordon Gecko, but I think, yeah.
he was named after Warren G. Hardy.
Nice.
Yeah, was it
Um, he lived to be 92 and died in Florida.
at a nursing home in Vero Beach?
Always.
Yeah. Anywho, that is my story. It
Yikes.
is again the doomed to fail part being water and MIC. If you have MIC and you're storing it in your backyard, do not introduce water to it because it will cause a chemical reaction. It'll kill your whole town.
Yeah, be careful with that. With that. Don't, I mean,
Yeah,
someone has to live next to a chemical plant, but like, I don't know, get a canary.
stop doing chemistry in your backyard.
That's
Chemical
100%.
factors in the
I saw like a thing that was like a house in, I don't know, like Palo Alto that was like really expensive, but it was a total tear down because it used to be a meth lab. You couldn't go into it
Why can't you go into a
because it
meth
was like
lab?
full, because you'll die because it's full of meth chemicals.
Are those bad for you?
Yes,
Or you're
they're
supposed
very bad
to
for you.
smoke it?
Yes, but it's like made in a lab. Like, so if you have a meth lab in your house is contaminated.
Oh shit. Yeah, yeah. I remember what's his face had that. What's his name? David David Shapiro? No, David Shakespeare? No, the Waco guy. What's his name? David Branch Davidian?
Crash,
Crash, yes.
crash.
David
He had a
Crash.
meth lab?
Well, when they moved into the Mount Carmel compound, they reported a meth lab in there, and so
hmm
the police had to come out and clear it and sanitize it.
Got it. Yeah,
Is
that's
it?
what I'm thinking is bad for you. I made an absolutely horrifying photo on Midjourney while you were talking, and I don't think I'm going to post it because it's terrible, but you want to see it?
Yeah. Always.
Um, okay, wait, how do I? This is you're gonna be just hold on to your butts.
Oh my God. What did you search?
I just wrote Bhopal Disaster, and the other ones are kind of tame, but this one's awful. It's like a child surrounded by skeletons that are standing up. It's very scary. It's like
Let's
very scary.
see. Imagine.
Oh, we're not talking, just silence.
This is the silent
Okay, I'm gonna stop
portion.
sharing.
This is the silent portion of
Cool.
the podcast. Yeah, there you go. There you
Well,
have it.
thank you, Farz. I'm excited
Uh,
to hear more about the um more engineering disasters.
more to come. I added gas disaster to my mid journey. Let's see what that produces. It's more of the same. I mean, these images are haunting, but they're
Ugh.
also not that far off from like what I picture in my mind when I think of like this event.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like there are like literal pictures of like people walking through the town and the animals are all dead. And then there's pictures of dead people everywhere.
Yeah, not good.
So we won't be posting all of those, but they'll exist.
Damn, that one's freaky.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, is there anything you want to read out, Taylor,
Oh,
before
well,
we
thank
cut
you.
off?
Yeah, we had a couple Instagram messages. Our friend September and my cousin Lindsay sent some things, ideas for you that I'll send to you. And then our friend Andrea said yes, she agrees that third parties are ridiculous for presidential elections, but it wouldn't be a problem if we used ranked choice voting. So something to think about. And you can be
That
everybody's second.
that is the ideal way to do it is ranked choice, but we would
Yeah,
anything
we'll
that
never do it.
improves. So here's the thing. My general thesis is that anything that would increase voter outcomes and are less likely to be diluted by other people's interests in those outcomes isn't going to happen. And ranked choice voting is one of those things.
Yeah, and I think it's certain specific people who are making that happen.
Right.
Um, so it's not
Right.
me, but it's out there.
I,
Like
I'm
just this
not.
week,
I didn't do it.
what? No, we didn't do it. I mean, like just this week, there was like a county where the predominantly black areas kept running out of ballots,
Yeah,
and they would bring them like 100 ballots a day, like an hour. You're like, what? It's so obvious what you're doing.
so
You
obvious.
have your mind, but
Um,
America. Anyway, yeah, that's it. So thank you, Andrea and Lindsay in September. And if anyone has any other ideas or thoughts, please let us know. We're on Instagram at Doom to Fail Pod and then at Gmail, doomtofailpod@gmail.com.
Perfect. Awesome. We'll go ahead and cut this off.